The question is asking for the probability of obtaining more heads than tails on 4 flips of a coin, so we can start by finding the total outcomes. And if we flip the coin 4 times, for the first flip, second flip, third flip, and the fourth flip, we have 2 outcomes for each flip, and that's heads and tails. And then we compare the heads and heads together, and then heads and tails, so we get 2 outcomes. And then we compare the tails and heads and tails, so we get 2 more outcomes, and we can multiply them because they're independent events. And then we repeat the step for the third flip and then the fourth flip. So we have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and that's 16. So we have 16 total outcomes. And then the probability of obtaining more heads than tails. We can list the combinations for heads and tails, and we get heads, 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 and then heads, 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 tails, heads, heads, tails, heads, and then heads, heads, tails, tails, heads, tails, heads, 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 tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, tails, heads. And then we have tails, heads, heads, heads. And then we can circle the combinations that have more heads than tails. So we can circle the heads, 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 the heads, 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 tails, heads, heads, tails, heads, and then the heads, tails, heads, heads, and then the tails, heads, heads, heads. So we have 5 outcomes that have more heads than tails. And then we had the 16 total outcomes that we found on earlier. So our answer is going to be 5 over 16. I hope you understood my explanation, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.